Hi, everybody. My name is Terry Lynn. My voice is, excuse me. Okay, here we go. Today is Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. My name is Terry Lynn. I'm a recovered Al-Anon, and I will be leading this meeting. We want to welcome everyone to our Al-Anon Big Book Recovery meeting. This is a step speaker meeting that meets every Wednesday night at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. We will study the 12 steps by using the precise instructions out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous as they relate to us as Al-Anons. Let's get our meeting started. This is the original AA preamble written by the AA Grapevine, describing the fellowship in 1940. We study the preamble with an open mind and an open heart to consider how it applies to Al-Anon. This helps us stay focused on the message of recovery the pioneers intended while observing the traditions in action. Through the actions taken on the instructions of the basic text, we comprehend what the pioneers meant when they described the membership of AA, which is that they worked a program of recovery and they no longer drank. In our case, we no longer obsessed over the alcoholic. Through continuous action and study of these principles, the understanding of the value of the original preamble reveals itself. We ask for your humble consideration of our sincere admiration of the pioneers of Alcoholics Anonymous. The simple hope is that we of Al-Anon will grow into the same clarity and unity that birthed the 12-step fellowship, because without them, after all, none of us would be here. The original AA preamble. We are gathered here because we are faced with the fact that we are powerless over alcohol and unable to do anything about it without the help of a power greater than ourselves. We feel that each person's religious views, if any, are his own affair. The simple purpose of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is to show what may be done to enlist the aid of a power greater than ourselves, regardless of what our individual conception of that power may be. In order to form a habit of depending upon and referring all we do to that power, we must first apply ourselves with some diligence. By often repeating these acts, they become habitual, and the help rendered becomes natural to us. We have come to know that as alcoholics, we suffer from a serious disease for which medicine has no cure. Our condition may be the result of an allergy which makes us different from other people. It has never been permanently cured by any treatment with which we are familiar. The only relief we have to offer is absolute abstinence, the second meaning of AA. There are no dues or fees. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. Each member squares his debt by helping others to recover. An Alcoholics Anonymous member is an alcoholic who, through the application of and adherence to the AA program, has forsworn the use of any and all alcoholic beverages in any form. The moment he takes so much as one drop of beer, wine, spirits, or any other liquid containing alcohol, he automatically loses all status as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. AA is not interested in sobering up drunks who are not sincere in their desire to stay sober for all time. Not being reformers, we offer our experience only to those who want it. We have a way out upon which we can absolutely agree and on which we can join in harmonious action. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our program. Those who do not recover are people who will not or simply cannot give themselves to this simple program. Now, you may like our program or you may not, but the simple fact remains that it works, and we believe is our only chance to recover. There is a vast amount of fun included in the AA fellowship. Some people might be shocked at our worldliness and levity, but just underneath there lies a deadly earnestness and a full realization that we must put first things first, and with each of us, the first thing is the solution to our alcoholic problem. To drink is to die. Faith must work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. In order to set our tone for this meeting, I ask that we bow our heads in a few moments of silent prayer and meditation, followed by the Serenity Prayer. Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. I wish to remind you that whatever is said at this meeting expresses our own individual opinion as of today and as of up to this moment. We do not speak for AA as a whole, and you are free to agree or disagree as you see fit. In fact, it is suggested that you pay no attention to anything which might not be reconciled with what is in the AA Big Book. If you don't have a big book, it's time that you bought one. Read it, study it, live with it. Follow the directions in it and learn what it means to be an AA. I'm going to have a little trouble with my voice tonight, it would appear, guys, so forgive me going forward. Having said that, it'll probably get better now, so Murphy's Law. A sponsor is anyone who has had a psychic change as a result of working the steps and has the willingness to work with others. For those looking for a sponsor to guide them through the steps, please stay tuned and have your pens ready to record phone numbers immediately after the meeting. Each Al-Anon group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying the message to the Al-Anon who still suffers. This is our primary spiritual aim. Our job as a group is to provide people with a place to learn about and work the steps. It has been our experience that working the steps consistently provides us with a better, saner life. We consider all else to be an outside issue. This includes personal problems. The proper venue for sharing such problems is with a sponsor. This is, after all, where real recovery takes place, in working the steps with a sponsor. We are just so glad we're all here, and we're all here because we're not all there. There will be a period of fellowship after the meeting. If you have questions, if you need a sponsor, if you need to check in or get current, or if you want to discuss other literature, please stick around for the fellowship. That would be a better time for these subjects. Okay, so this is the second in a series of 4-step speaker meetings this month, one per week, each Wednesday at this time. Last week, I talked about steps 1, 2, and 3, and I really landed heavily on step 1. This week, I'll be talking about 4 to 6, and next week 7 to 9, and then 10 to 12, of course. And there are 5 Wednesdays in July. So on the 5th one, I'll have the opportunity to share my story. So I'll do that too. I'll be referencing the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, 4th edition. And I'm going to be bopping around in the book a lot. If you have one and you'd like to follow along, you can go ahead and grab it. I guess I recommended that earlier. If you don't have one, it can be downloaded, free download off AA.org, and I think there are other places you can get it. Or you can just sit back and listen. We study the Big Book in Al-Anon, well, for several reasons. One is to learn about the disease of alcoholism. Super important for us as Al-Anons to educate ourselves about the disease of alcoholism. In our Tradition 5, part of it is that we are to understand and Have compassion for and understand our alcoholic relatives. I think it says, how are we going to do that if we don't, if we don't know anything about their condition, right? If we don't know what they're up against. So we can learn about that in the big book. We also note when we read the big book with an open mind and with a little bit of honesty that our sponsor helps us with, that we are very similar to the alcoholic, except we just don't have the drinking behavior. But we most definitely have the same kind of thinking behavior, the same kind of attitude situation. It may come out in different ways, but we are very similar. So we find that out. And the other reason we use that book is that it actually contains very clear, concrete, simple, to the point, original instructions on how to do the 12 steps. Thank goodness. I looked here, there, and everywhere for actual simple instructions on how to do those all-important 12 steps because I desperately needed a spiritual awakening. And I was in Al-Anon for a really long time, and I love the Al-Anon literature, I really do. But I couldn't find something that was simple and concrete enough in the, extensive collection of Al-Anon literature that I have here. I'm looking at it on the bookshelf right now. I couldn't find something that was clear enough for me to be able to follow. But because of another fellowship I'm in, I stumbled upon the big book again, and I was like, oh my God, here are the directions that I really need. So a sponsor took me through those steps. Although I'm doing steps 4, 5, and 6 today, I'm going to just really quickly recap steps 1, 2, and 3. I have a lot to talk about with 4, 5, and 6 today, though, so I'm not sure how much I'm going to get done, but we'll see how it goes. Let me see here. So step 1 is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. We have the same step 1 as the alcoholic. And if I turn to page 44 in the big book, it says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. So they're talking about an alcoholic and their drinking behavior here. But if I'm thinking about myself and my Al-Anonic behavior, and in my case, that was obsessing. Oh my God. Resenting, trying to arrange their lives, trying to educate them, trying to fix them. Those were my Al-Anonic behaviors. Again, it says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. I honestly wanted to quit doing that kind of stuff, and I couldn't under my own power. Okay? And then it says, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take. So I can sub out thinking instead of drinking. Or if when thinking. And to me, that can encompass all of that stuff that I talked about, the obsessing and the managing and the fixing and all that. If when obsessing, I have little control over the amount. So I know when I used to start obsessing about another person, and in my case, it didn't matter if it was an alcoholic. It's just anybody, I'm an equal opportunity obsessor kind of person. It could be anybody. Once I got started thinking about other people in a way where I was judging them or figuring I was better than they were and so on and so forth, I had a really hard time stopping. Like I would lose control. And then unfortunate behaviors and events would come out of that line of thinking. Like I would words would fall out of my mouth that I did not intend, and they would harm people, and then I would feel bad afterward. And yeah, like a lot of stuff that I didn't mean to happen would happen. So that kind of encompasses step one in itself. Can I stop if I really want to? Can I make a firm resolution? I'm just not going to worry about this person anymore. I'm just not going to let them bother me. And can I keep that resolution? No. In my case, no. And if you're an Al-Anonic like me, then probably the answer for you is no as well. And for me, once I got started with the, worrying about somebody and judging them and so on and so forth, I lost control of how much I did of that. And if you're like me in that case too, then, you probably need a spiritual awakening that we can get by doing the 12 steps just like I did. All right. So if that is the case, that means I'm powerless. Like with all my heart, I wanted to be able to just leave people alone, stop judging people, stop figuring I knew a better way to do things than other people did, that kind of thing. And I couldn't, even though I wanted to with all my heart. So that means my power, my own personal power, was insufficient. So I needed a power greater than myself because mine was insufficient, right? So power greater than myself, we hear about higher power in that in 12 steps. And some people want to fight the idea that it's a religious program or that it has to be God or whatever, but it's just power greater than myself. Like I so incredibly badly needed a power greater than myself that it's not even funny. And that's what I got by taking those 12 steps. Is just I got that gut level knowledge that I couldn't fix this thing on my own. So I finally welcomed the idea that there might be something more powerful than I that could, right? And I proceeded from there. Step 3 is made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood Him. I'm going to turn a few more pages here in my book. So at the top of page 61, it says, if His arrangements, His being us, if our arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as we wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including us, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. That's true, right? Doesn't that sound wonderful? And it says in trying to make these arrangements, these are the things I used to do, right? The educating other people and fixing them and managing them. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. So what it's saying here is that we like to get our own way. Sometimes we try to get our own way by being nice. Being the one that holds everybody together and just like being the good one. And for Al-Anon, that's a really tough call, because if you're in a situation where you have an active alcoholic around, it's pretty darn easy to label them as the villain. But again, if we get together with a sponsor and we start doing an inventory that we're going to talk about today, we're going to find out that we've done some things ourselves, that are very similar to the alcoholic. On page 62, it says, selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. And years ago when I read this book, I got to this page and I read that sentence and I thought, oh my God, yes, that is the root of my troubles. I was a person that they used the term maladjusted to life in the big book, and that is what I was, maladjusted to life. Did not fit in with people, didn't have friends, because I wasn't interested in anybody else. I was self-centered. I was thinking about myself and, what I could get for myself. Now, there may be Al-Anons out there that are listening to this and saying to themselves, well, that's not me. I'm not selfish. All I do all day long is for other people. I'm completely unselfish. But our sponsor helps us see that we have certain motives for what we do. And, sometimes we might find ourselves being kind, considerate, patient, and self-sacrificing in order to get our own way. That's the reason we're being that way. Okay, so it's kind of hard to understand. Maybe I shouldn't have gotten into it. But when I read that sentence all those years ago, that selfishness, self-centeredness is the root of my trouble, I had a moment of clarity that was my truth. I had a little mini awakening. And I know now that and I didn't know then, but that mini awakening that we have every once in a while, something will be so clear and we'll be like, oh, I gotta write that down or whatever, right? But we don't remember it. Like our mind is such that we forget these little gems of wisdom. And, even if we did remember them, we wouldn't be able to act on them. We need a higher power to fix these things. Like, I tried to fix this self-centeredness problem back all those years ago when I found out that was my problem, and I was unable to do that. So we are going to forge ahead. Stuff I've just been talking about were steps 1, 2, and 3 still. So I'm going to forge ahead into steps 4, 5, and 6. Step 4 is made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Now, what is an inventory? Like, that sounds kind of foreign. Well, it's about pinpointing a person's shortcomings, right? So as Al-Anons, if you're out there, don't you think maybe as Al-Anons we've done thousands of inventories over the years? It's just that they weren't about us. They were about other people, right? We've taken other people's inventories over and over and over. In fact, that's where we live. We live taking other people's inventories. I'm going to read, let me see here. Starting at the very bottom, page 65, it says, the first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. Now, is that not where Al-Anons live or what? Right? I mean, that's why we come to Al-Anon, because we have concluded that others are wrong, and that's as far as we ever got. And we can't stand it anymore. Many people come to Al-Anon to try to figure out how to get the alcoholic to stop drinking. And that is not the reason for Al-Anon. It is the reason for Al-Anon, and the reason for the 12 steps is to find peace around whatever's going on in your life and whoever's in your life. Peace around it and guidance from this higher power, right? It's not to do more of the fixing and controlling that we've already been doing. So this inventory idea, it may sound kind of scary, like when people first come into program and they read the 12 steps, some of those steps kind of jump out at us as terrifying, like step 4 would be one of them, step 5 would be another one, step 9 probably. But if we're solid with step 1, that we're doomed on our own power and we're just never going to change and we're going to get more and more miserable because this thing is a progressive illness. It's a spiritual illness, this thing where we don't have power to control this thing. If we're at a gut level convinced we can't do this, we're on board with what our higher power wants, then none of the steps are that scary. If we have trouble with any of the steps along the way, we have a step 1 problem. So we're just going to trust our sponsor. She's going to give us very simple instructions regarding step 4. Okay, let me see here. I've got some notes. I've done inventories in Al-Anon, and when I did inventories in the past, I thought I was supposed to write like pages and pages of my experiences and feelings, and then, for my 5th step, it would be like a verbal marathon that I was supposed to subject my poor sponsor to all that stuff. But the big book uses the term life story, tell all my life story, and it's kind of an unfortunate, in my opinion, term that Bill Wilson wrote there saying life story, because people took that literally. And yeah, they wrote a novel instead of just a short little checklist for inventories. But yeah, an inventory does not need to be an accounting of the entire life of Terry Lynn, heavily accompanied by all the bad stuff people did to me, kind of thing, because that's what my 4th steps were in the past. And like I did one time that took me 8 months to complete. And really, I felt worse at the end of that, during that process and at the end of that process than I did when I started it. Just really still full of resentment and fear. It didn't help me one little bit. So on page 65, it shows us what they mean by inventory in the big book. And we see there that it is just a little checklist kind of thing. In this case, the example they're using is regarding resentments. Okay. It tells us in no uncertain terms that we are immediately after we make our decision to carry on in the steps in step 3, that we are to launch into the step 4 process immediately. We're not to wait, because our mind's going to convince us that we're okay, that we're going to be able to fix this thing on our own. So we have to carry on quickly. In my case, my sponsor gave me very precise, again, my brain needs really concrete, simple instructions. She gave me those on how to do my 4th step. She gave me little worksheets and told me what to write in various columns regarding resentments, fears, and the way I had treated people with whom I had had intimate relationships. And she didn't make that stuff up. That stuff is all in the big book, and that's the order they wrote it down in: the resentments, fears, and sex conduct. They wrote that in the big book, that it says we took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure, being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what had defeated us. We considered its common manifestations. So, common manifestations, again, being resentment, fear, and the way we treated people in our relationships. So regarding resentments, it says, resentment is the number 1 offender I'm going to repeat that. Resentment is the number one offender. Resentment was one of my favorite pastimes. Resentment and self-pity was like an Olympic sport for me. And it goes on to say here, it destroys more alcoholics than anything else. And I'll change that. It destroys more Al-Anonics than anything else. Absolutely destroys our lives, sitting around in that resentment. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institution, and principles with whom we were angry, and that was one of the columns in the worksheet she gave me. It was column 1. I just made a list of everybody I was mad at. It says we asked ourselves why we were angry. So that was column 2. I wrote in very, very concise terms, why I held a resentment toward that person. And then it says, in most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. And that was column 3, and that was just little check boxes. So we start feeling resentful toward people when we feel threatened. It could be financially, it could be, we figure it's making us feel bad about ourselves. We might figure it's going to make other people, judge us, whatever. That's why we get mad at people. So I was to mark that off. And there's going to be another column coming up in our future here shortly. But I just wanted to talk quickly about the difference between anger and resentment, because there is a difference. Anger would be like today when I was driving. If somebody had cut me off in traffic and, scared me and, I had thought to myself, oh, damn, he almost hit me, he almost crunched the back of my car, then it would have cost me all this money, blah, 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 blah. I would have been mad in that moment, and I would have done with the steps what my sponsor taught me how to do, and it would have been done. Like, I would have been angry in the moment, but then it would have been done. But if 10 years from now, I was still thinking about that guy that cut me off in traffic and almost crunched my car, that would be resentment. So it's when some sort of thing happens that, like probably something definitely happened where a person possibly harmed us. It might have been entirely made up in my case in my head, but probably somebody harmed us. But in my case, I kept those stories alive in my head. Like, that resentment thing is where we rethink and we rethink and we rethink about that thing that bothered us all those years ago. And I mean, if I were to still be sitting here as I'm 62, so if I were still sitting here, feeling angry about things that happened when I was a child, that's a Terry Lynn problem. That's not a problem, of whoever did the bad thing back then. That's a me problem. I'm the one that kept that alive. It tells us, it uses the word permit on page 66 to the precise extent that we permit this, the resentment. So that word permit means I'm participating if I'm keeping a resentment alive. It's doing something for me, right? It's giving me some sort of an outlet. And there may be people on the line or people listening to this recording that are saying, no, I hate resenting people. It's not my fault. But I don't know. Now on the other side of the steps, I can see that I was the one that was keeping those things alive. I heard a speaker say that resentment is like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to die, right? Like it just doesn't make sense to keep something alive. That's something I'm doing, right? So the question is, do I want to keep doing it or do I want to get over it? And that'll be a little farther on in the steps. Right now I'm just putting my finger on who I resent, why I resent them, what it affected in me. Okay. So it says on page 67, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, right? Where I had always focused. Now I'm going to put that out of my mind. We resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. So that's that column 4 I talked about. This is where I put my finger on what was going on with me. Now, my sponsor was very helpful to me with this because when I did my 4th step, I would not have been able to, put my finger on, how I had been selfish or dishonest or anything with people. So she gave me some materials that helped me kind of see what, in a hazy way kind of, where I had been acting that way toward that person, but I was still kind of burdened with, being mad at the other guy at this point. So it was hard for me to still see my part. When I did my 5th step with her, she helped me see my part crystal clear. And again, she helped me disregard the other person entirely. Like when I got together with her, we focused only on my part in the situation, which is the only part that I can, give to God, is that 4th column. I can't change what happened in the past. I can't change other people. I just can't change that stuff. But those things in that 4th column, my character defects of selfishness, dishonesty, fear, self-seeking, being inconsiderate, that stuff is in the present. And I can give that stuff to God, and that stuff can be changed. And I know this because it is being changed, and it has been changed. And it's amazing. Again, I used to literally feed off resentment. It used to keep me alive. And now it's just not something I want to do at all anymore. There is a prayer at the top of page 67. When I say that, about how much better things are for me these days, don't mistake me for having said I'm perfect, because I'm certainly not. Sometimes people piss me off. I mean, it happens. But when they do, there's a prayer in the big book, top of page 67. It says, we asked God to help us. Okay, I'm just going to start at the bottom. We realized the people who wronged us. So somebody did something I didn't like, right? We realized people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms, that would be what they did that I didn't like. And the way these disturbed us, that would be, if they hurt my self-esteem, they hurt my feelings somehow, say. They, like ourselves, I have a big underline on that in my book, they, like ourselves, were sick too. And when they say sick, they mean spiritually sick. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man, how can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. Okay. So when somebody makes me mad these days, right? For me to like almost immediately turn around in my mind and ask God, how can I be helpful to this person? Save me from being angry. Thy will be done. And I do. That's exactly what I do when somebody makes me mad. I ask God, how can I be helpful? Well, oh my God, like talk about switcheroo, right? Because the last thing I used to want to do would be to be helpful to a person that was making me mad, right? Okay. So that's a little bit about resentments. We're going to go on to fears. What do I want to read about fears? At the bottom, page 67, fear somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve, but did not we ourselves set the ball rolling. Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. When I first read that, I used to think, what the heck do they mean? Fear ought to be classed with stealing. When I'm in fear, I'm living in the future. I'm worrying about, whatever's going to happen going forward, right? I'm polishing up my crystal ball and I'm figuring, I'm forecasting, right? And I'm not even getting paid for it. And I'm usually not right. So I believe what he meant by Bill W., what he meant by that was it steals me out of the equation of life, being present here where I can be helpful right here in the moment. If I'm thinking about the future, just like if I'm feeling resentful about stuff that happened in the past, I'm being stolen out of the present moment and I can't be helpful over that either, right? It goes on to say we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper even if we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we have them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. So, back when we did step 3, it talked about selfishness, self-centeredness was our trouble. And here in this fear section, it's saying self-reliance is a problem. Now, self-reliance sounds like a good thing, right? And it is a good thing to a certain extent. But if you find yourself to be a powerless Al-Anon regarding, this situation we have where we can't stop obsessing around other people, that self-reliance thing where we're trying to either fix that problem or fix the other guy, self-reliance is not good because our power is insufficient. So relying on self is useless, right? So we're going to need to do something different. And it says next there, perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him. Does He enable us to match calamity with serenity? I love that paragraph. So again, what a turnaround. Instead of being fearful, we're going to remember that decision we made in step 3 where effectively we fired ourselves as the boss of our lives. And we decided that, going forward, we're going to take the steps we need to make God the boss of our lives, and, again, in this book, it gives us very clear directions for a concrete way to put that into effect. We don't have to make it up. So my sponsor gave me worksheets for the fear stuff here too. And same deal, the column 1, 2, 3, and 4, just pretty much the exact same thing. So, and for all the fears, I would say, well, I fear such and such. For example, I fear, not being able to do this program, like not, for failing at doing this program. And she said, well, do you think God wants the best for you? And I'm like, yeah. And she said, well, are you on board with God's plan for you? She didn't use those words. Those are my words. But along those lines, she said something like that. Are you on board with God's plan? And I'm like, yeah. And she said, well, then what do you have to fear? And, it's so simple when you put it that way. If I'm on board with God's plan, if I fired myself as the boss, then, then I should be good to go. Like, it says in the book, God either is or he isn't. He's all or nothing kind of thing. And for me, it had to be all because I just couldn't do this thing. So the sex harms part, it's really about how we've treated people with whom we've had relationships. And on page 69 it says, we reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and we looked at it. So again, another simple worksheet, a list of people, that, for me, it was a list of people that I didn't feel so good about how I treated them. And, I put my finger on, whether I was selfish with them and whether I had wanted my own way all the time. Yes, I had wanted my own way in all my relationships. That's selfish. Whether I had been fearful. Yes, because I had kept trying to change them. And that's fearful. Whether I had been dishonest. Yes, I had put myself in a position to be harmed by getting together with people that I knew weren't good for me, or put myself in a position to be harmed by, trying to change other people when I knew that they weren't going to take kindly to that, or by trying to be perfectionistic. All of that is dishonest, putting myself in a position to be harmed. I was inconsiderate toward these people, no doubt about it. Self-seeking, getting into relationships not because I wanted to add to this person's life and, see what I could bring to this person. No, I wanted to get into relationships so that I could have a second income in the household, or so that I wouldn't be alone, or like it was self-seeking kind of reasons that I went into relationships. It wasn't, what can I bring to this person and how can I enrich their lives? It was, what can Terry Lynn get out of this? That's what it was about. So when I talk about selfishness during this fourth step thing and all this dishonesty and all this stuff I'm talking about, we don't use this inventory. It's not about beating ourselves up, or that we're this evil, terrible person or anything like that. We're just trying to get to the point where we can see the truth about ourselves. And in the fifth step, our sponsor is going to help us with that. They're not going to beat us up either. They're just going to help us see the truth. That is their job. We're going to do this inventory according to their instructions. Then we're going to bring it to them, and they're going to walk us through it and just help us get honest about, our behavior and attitude from the past. And these character defects of selfishness, fear, dishonesty, self-seeking, inconsideration, that is what has been blocking us off from our higher power. That was what, for me, was getting in the way of connecting. I had brief little blips and moments in my life where I felt connected. I was connected for just brief moments of time, but it didn't last. And having taken the steps this last time with my sponsor about 4.5 years ago, she taught me how to keep that connection and, and not just keep it the same, for it to continue to grow. Step 6, I might say a few words about step 6 next week, but let me see here. The top paragraph on page 76 says, we look at step 6, we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, everyone? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. So those things we have admitted are objectionable are the character defects that I was talking about: selfishness, fear, self-centeredness, and so on. Those are our character defects, shortcomings, flaws. Bill W. uses different words for the same thing. Writing is very wooden and boring if you use the exact same word for the same thing all the time, and he's a good writer, so he didn't do that. So to me, what step 6 meant was, okay, now I've gone through my step 4 and my step 5. My sponsors helped me get honest. So step 6 being entirely ready to meant to me, do I want to go back to oblivion, in my case, go back to being a victim and not realizing that I had a part in what's going on around me? Did I want to go back to that? Or did I want to go forward and ask God to keep me aware, like let this awakening I had just had not be just a brief moment in time of clarity, but continue to go forward, showing me when I'm being selfish or dishonest or whatever. And I wholeheartedly wanted God to continue to show me when these character defects of mine were popping up. Absolutely did. Like I wanted him to smack me in the middle of my forehead every time one of these character defects were coming up, because I wanted to get better, and my higher power was the only one that could do that. So I guess that's going to be it for tonight. Yeah, I think I'm just going to end up here. Thanks everybody for being here. Next week we're going to talk about steps 7, 8, and 9. Maybe if I forgot stuff I want to talk about from today, we'll talk about that as well. And thanks for joining in. I'm gonna 7th tradition, every group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. This group does not have a payment structure in place and currently has no overhead expenses. If you would like to fulfill Tradition 7, please direct contributions directly to the Al-Anon World Service Office by visiting alanon.org. For questions about this meeting, or if you are looking for a sponsor, please send emails to alanonbigbookrecovery@gmail.com. That's alanonbigbookrecovery@gmail.com. Recordings can be accessed on YouTube by searching at Al-Anon Step Speaker in the YouTube search box. If you are interested in other Al-Anon meetings that follow the Big Book, please visit AlanonBigBookSolutionGroup.org. Lots and lots of links there, hey? Okay, I'm going to read from page 164 in the Big Book. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order, but you obviously cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with Him is right and great events will come to pass for you and for countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Now let's have a moment of silence for the Al-Anon who still suffers, followed by the Lord's Prayer, or a prayer of your own choosing, said in silence. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.